What's up, everyone? I'm Matt, and I decided to do my judicial rhetoric on is the world more dangerous today than it was in the past? The world is not more dangerous than it was in the past. We just have more social media platforms, so we find out things in real time. We have more social media platforms, to name a few, like Snapchat, Instagram, and Facebook, where individuals get to post everything they want to do whenever, so we can find out information really fast. Due to all this information, this gives people false conclusions that the world is more violent than it was in the past, but it's really not. This is due to everyone being able to take videos and post everything right away. Let me give you some background information. In the past, there was no social media platforms, so everyone relied on newspapers or TV to get their news. On top of that, violent crime rates from the past decade compared to today have actually declined. Also, now we even have hate crime laws that we didn't even have in the past. So these laws protect us by imposing harsher penalties for hate crimes, and this might make people think twice before committing a crime. To go more in depth about where we get our news from the world. So back then, we got our news from like newspapers, word of mouth, and TV. So on TV, they used to have the 6 o'clock news, uh, the 11 o'clock news, but now we have the 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. news, then the 12 p.m. news, and then the 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. news, and then finally the 11 p.m. news. So now you could tell we have a lot of news stations than we did back then. On top of all of those news times, we have a whole channel dedicated to the news, such as CNN. Since since there's more time on the air for all the news, we get to hear more things about happening in our country. Back then there was only 30 minutes, but now we get all those times I listed before. Also, for example, to go more in depth, things we hear about is let's think about this week, like the shootings in Colorado where a crazed gunman killed 10 people in a supermarket. That is crazy. But also, there was the history is filled with all these stories about mass murders. To name a few from there's Jack the Ripper, the Charles Manson cult, and the Son of Sam, and the Columbine High School massacre. These are just the top stories listed, but there's a lot more that was in small towns that you don't even hear about nowadays. Brings me to my next point. Violent crimes have declined over the past decade. So I went more in depth and I looked into statistica.com and safehome.org, which told us in 2019 there was 16,425 reported cases of murder or manslaughter in the United States. So this is actually a decrease than it was in 1991, where there was 24,000 murders or manslaughters reported. And this drop is a number despite a 20% increase in our population. So yeah, overall, crime rate has dropped in the past decade. Going more in depth, it decreased from 11.6 million criminal incidents in 1999 to 8.4 crimes reported in 2018. Though we are in 2021 and statistics only go to 2018, this gotta tell us that the world's heading in the right direction, in my opinion. Yeah, so my third argument would be so now we have hate crime laws that we didn't have in the past. These laws are meant to protect us by putting harsher penalties for hate crimes. So it should make people think twice before committing a crime like that. But there's always going to be those hate groups still around, like the KKK or the Ku Klux Klan or neo Nazi organizations. But in the past, stuff like this got swept under the rug. But since these are harsher laws, this is gonna probably stop most people from doing it. But there's always going to be those crazy groups, as I listed before, that are going to sit there and do what they're going to do, unfortunately. But now with all these, now with these laws, there'll be like stiffer penalties, so it might make them think twice. That so you may think the older generation remembers the past as being very safe. Like they would go into public parks alone, no cell phones, would was called home through their windows, walked to school without parents. But this is not the case. It wasn't always safe. But it says in worldatlas.com in the years 1960 to 1970, the homicides rates had doubled. There was also car thefts, burglaries, robberies, rapes. But today the numbers are going down actually instead of going up. So you have to think about it. If all of our parents and stuff would go over out in the real world, while crimes were actually doubled back then. So you got to really think we're not living in a crazy time today, but except it's just all the news that are thrown at us. So it's the more we know is actually kind of making everyone scared in their own way. So in conclusion, the world is not more dangerous than it was in the past. We just have more social media platforms like Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, etc. So we find out more information on stuff in real time. We also get our news from around the world very different from the past to now. Violent crimes have actually declined over the past decade. And now we even have crime laws that we didn't have in the past that will have stiffer penalties on everyone who would try to do hate crimes. So I want to close this off with the world is not more dangerous today than it was in the past. We just have more access to stories at our natural fingertips. The crimes are not new, we are just hearing more about them. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for hearing my judicial rhetoric, and I can't wait to hear more about yours.